The creation of our imperfect world. Chapter 10. The world itself is the perfect manifestation of imperfection. Henry Miller. 1. The sun is a perpetual energy factory. The sun was created from a direct command given by an advanced human being. The command caused the subatomic particles found in dark matter to form into a cluster of the required elements. These specific elements cause a perpetual chain reaction that releases enormous amounts of energy. This reaction is similar to a nuclear explosion created in the confines of our atmosphere upon this Earth. However, the quote-unquote nuclear reaction that was responsible for the sun was subjected first to the environment in which the reaction took place, and second, to the types of elements used to create the reaction. The environment was a vacuum of empty space. Enriched uranium and plutonium are the known elements used in some of the nuclear reactions upon this Earth. The elements used in the creation of the sun are generally unknown to current scientific classifications. A sun's nuclear reaction does not spread beyond a predetermined boundary, thus creating its own atmosphere. This encapsulating atmosphere was created by the reaction itself. In other words, in empty space, or in an environment of dark matter, the reaction becomes perpetual and forms a spherical boundary that appears to us on Earth as a huge ball of fire. The fireball gives off tremendous amounts of energy in the form of light and heat, which are given off in perpetuity, forever. 2. The sun creates elements. From the limited conclusions of current scientific observations, the sun is made up of 70% hydrogen and 28% helium. Carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen make up about 1.5%, and the other 0.5% is made up of small amounts of other elements such as neon, iron, silicon, magnesium, and sulfur. These conclusions have led scientists to make assumptions about the sun that are not the real truth. The sun is not made up of these elements. It creates them. If you ask a scientist what created the nuclear reaction that created the sun, their responsive theories would differ because they haven't yet figured out what space, dark matter, consists of, or better, which elements, if any, exist in the space between planets, solar systems, and galaxies. 3. The sphere is the universal shape of all matter. When a group of molecules consisting of 2 hydrogen atoms bound to 1 oxygen atom, H2O, water, are released into an environment of dark matter, space, it forms into a sphere or ball much like the shape of the sun. Yet, when the same combination of elements are introduced into the environment of our planet Earth, they do not form a sphere or a circle, but instead spread out indiscriminately into what we observe as clouds, rain, rivers, lakes, and oceans. All elements, when they occur in sufficient mass in the environment of dark matter, space, react according to one universal law. They always form into a sphere, as evidenced by the sun, its major planets, and their moons, and the spherical orbits in which these celestial bodies move. Nowhere in the open space of the universe, where matter is massed together, will a rectangle or any other shape exist, or any other motion take place that does not reflect the form of a sphere. The perfection of the sphere as a circle, or its imperfection as an elliptical shape, oval, depends on the forces affecting it. For this reason, some comets, for example, seem to have an elliptical orbit. The round form of a sphere is caused by the symmetrical forces that are generated by the positive and negative charged particles that make up all matter. When these forces are allowed to act independently in space without being influenced by another form of energy, they will always exist in a spherical form. In addition, all asteroids, moons, planets, solar systems, and galaxies circumvent or rotate around a given point and form circles or rings called orbits. These orbits also result from the symmetrical forces caused by the environment of the dark matter throughout the universe. However, as other elements are created from the dark matter of space to form other planets, solar systems, and galaxies, other energy forces are subsequently created that can affect the shape of perfect spheres, which cause them to lose their perfection. The Earth, for example, is round, but it is not a perfect sphere because of the gravitational/magnetic forces of the Sun and other celestial bodies that are near it. 4. Dark matter, space, contains the elementary parts of all matter. We have already introduced the real truth that space consists of the subatomic particles that make up all matter. In addition, we have limited our description of these particles to being only protons, neutrons, and electrons, although science continues to create exotic new ideas and concepts of quarks, strings, and many other notions. Nevertheless, it is only important to understand that the basic components of all matter are what make up the vastness of space, or dark matter. We must always keep in mind that scientific classifications, theories, laws, and hypotheses are simply the manner in which primitive, imperfect scientists communicate with each other. Scientists make their observations, then conclusions, and then create names and titles for what they believe they have discovered. The subatomic particles called protons, neutrons, and electrons are some of these names, as well as even the term quote-unquote subatomic. Real truth has nothing to do with these terms. Advanced human beings do not use these terms. These terms are as imperfect as the minds that created them. Nevertheless, in order to come to some reasonable understanding of the real truth of how things actually work, we must use the words and terms that are most familiar to us. 5. The sun gets its energy from dark matter. As mentioned before, the sun was created from the environment of space by the command of an advanced human who has the power and knowledge to manipulate and control dark matter. As the sun uses the protons, neutrons, and electrons of space to create the hydrogen, helium, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, neon, iron, silicon, magnesium, sulfur, and other elements that produce its energy, the next logical questions could be, isn't the sun going to burn out? Or does the sun continually create energy? Erroneous scientific speculation assumes the sun will eventually burn out by running out of energy. Science is again wrong. How can the sun burn out when it is continually taking in the protons, neutrons, and electrons from a vast and endless space and transforming them into elements which create the energy that it produces? The reality of the sun is that it is an advanced nuclear reactor that absorbs the surrounding space and creates elements. It will never cease to exist or do what it was quote unquote programmed to do as long as the dark matter of space exists. And there is no end to the dark matter of space. The sun is a perfectly balanced and pressurized sphere that endlessly regulates itself. When its energy levels decrease, the pressure of the sun's atmosphere also decreases, allowing the surrounding subatomic elements to enter from the higher pressure state of open space. In that unique sense, the sun effectively, quote unquote, breathes. Its intake is dark matter, and its exhaled breath is perpetual light and warmth. As the earth and its environs use the energy created by the sun, the byproducts of this exchange of energy are the basic components of matter that emit back into space, where they will eventually again be used by the sun. These basic components, protons, neutrons, and electrons, cannot be destroyed, but are continually recycled throughout the universe as they perform the purpose for which they are used in the process of creation. Keep in mind that by themselves, these basic components cannot create energy. Quote unquote energy is the byproduct of their interaction with each other. 6. Solar system planned according to our needs. The plans for our solar system, its size, dimensions, and number of planets, moons, asteroids, etc., were made after the batch of newly created human beings, to which we belong, was properly foundationalized and ready for our own part of the universe. This quote-unquote part is known as our solar system. The exact number of people who are going to inhabit each solar system, as well as the size of each planet on which they will eventually live forever, determine the size and power of its sun. Each planet is created and perfectly balanced to move in a pre-designed orbital path around the sun. Moons are also precisely positioned as necessary to keep each planet where it should be. Properly placed asteroid belts aid in the stabilization of each planet's composition. The location and composition of all planets and their moons are pre-planned when the sun, which is also pre-planned, is designed for each particular solar system. This process is no different, although much more highly advanced, than an architect or engineer considering the needs of a client, then drawing up the plans needed to meet these needs. The plans are then given to a contractor, who proceeds to build whatever the plans entail. 7. Gravity and magnetism are the same thing. To understand the real truth about how our solar system works, we need to combine the concepts of gravity and magnetism. In other words, there is no difference. Both forces are caused by the subatomic particles that make up matter reacting to each other and creating an energy force. Again, quoting from above, by themselves, the basic components of matter cannot create energy. Quote-unquote energy is the byproduct of their interaction with each other. To keep it as simple as we can, we are going to use positive and negative forces to explain reality. However, it should again be noted that using these terms is for the sake of understanding and does not necessarily reflect the exact cause and effect of how things work in the universe. However, it should again be noted that using these terms is for the sake of understanding and does not necessarily reflect the exact cause and effect of how things work in the universe. But to aid in facilitating the reader's comprehension, these recognizable terms will work just fine. 8. Powerful invisible energy forces keep the planets aligned. A magnet has two poles, one positive and one negative. If we attempt to touch two positive or two negative poles together, an invisible energy force does not allow it, except with the application of considerable force, energy. Yet, a positive and a negative pole are attracted to each other with the same force. The easiest way to understand our solar system is to view all matter found therein as emitting certain levels of positive and negative energy, which either keeps substances together, positive negative, or keeps them apart, positive positive or negative negative. The sun can be viewed as the most powerful positive energy force in our solar system. Each planet can also be viewed as distinct positive energy forces, each with differing levels. To illustrate, let's call the positive level of Mercury 1, Venus 2, Earth 3, Mars 4, Jupiter 5, Saturn 6, Uranus 7, Neptune 8, and Pluto 9, with Mercury having the lowest positive energy level among the planets and Pluto the greatest. Because Mercury's positive energy level is only 1, it is not repelled as far away from the Sun as Pluto, whose positive energy level is much greater. If we were to change Pluto's energy level to a 1, then it would be found at the exact same distance from the Sun as Mercury. The stronger the positive energy emitted, the further away the object is going to stay from another positive force. As long as the planet's positive levels remain unchanged, they will never get any closer to the Sun than they presently are. 9. Moons help keep the solar system balanced. The moons of the planets help regulate and balance each of their energy levels and ensure that each planet maintains its position and does what it was intended to do when the solar system was planned. The closest planet to the Sun that has a moon is the Earth. Because of the Earth's moon and the subsequent changes required to allow life to exist on Earth, and thus the unique energy forces that the Earth emits, the rotation of Venus is affected. 10. Planetary rotation is affected by other planets. Venus rotates backwards in relation to the general rotation of the Earth because it has not yet been transformed into a planet that allows the existence of living organisms. Living organisms need properly regulated energy from the Sun to produce the products and byproducts associated with life. When a planet is changed to support life by advanced humans who know what they are doing, the energy forces it emits are altered to accommodate that change. When Venus is transformed into a life-bearing planet, it will emit the same energy forces as the Earth and will be the exact same distance from the Sun that the Earth is. The two planets will never collide, however, because their orbital paths around the Sun will be varied and regulated appropriately, as will the rest of the planets also. As previously mentioned, any form of matter can be affected by other forms of matter in close proximity. Venus is situated between a planet that supports life, Earth, and one that does not, Mercury. If it were situated between two planets that supported life, it would rotate in the same direction as all life-supporting planets do. If it were situated between two planets that did not support life, its rotation would be the same as those planets. For example, if we were to move Venus closer to the Sun than Mercury, then both Mercury's and Venus's rotation would reverse, and Mercury would rotate backwards instead. Or if we placed Venus in between two other planets that do not support life, its rotation would reflect the rotation of those neighboring planets. This is the reason why all the planets in our solar system rotate on their axis in the same direction, except for Venus. Venus is the only one situated between two planets of profoundly different charged forces. One might ask why Earth, a life-bearing planet, rotates like every other non-life-bearing planet in the solar system, except for Venus. Earth is located between Mars and Venus, both non-life-bearing planets. When the solar system was first created, Venus rotated like all the other planets. The change in direction did not occur until Earth's energy levels were changed by advanced humans who intended for Earth to accommodate life. Upon changing the energy forces emitted from Earth, Venus's rotation was affected. The planet Uranus appears to be rotating differently than the other planets. This is, however, just an optical illusion because of the way Uranus is situated between Saturn and Neptune. Some might argue that Mars, like Venus, is located between a life-bearing planet, Earth, and one that does not support life, Jupiter. So why isn't Mars' rotation affected the same way Venus's is? The simple answer: because there is no asteroid belt between Venus and Mercury, as there is between Mars and Jupiter. 11. Asteroid belts impact the planets. Asteroid belts were put into place to regulate the positive and negative forces and to aid in the regulation of the composition of the planets. There are two main asteroid belts in our solar system, one that separates the four inner, solid planets from the four outer, gaseous planets, and another, called Kuiper, that separates outermost solid Pluto from the gaseous planets. Therefore, this is how our solar system is arranged: the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, asteroid belt, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, asteroid belt, and then Pluto. If the asteroid belts were removed, the gaseous planets situated between them would become solid in composition. The asteroids create an energy field which keeps the elements that make up the gaseous planets from becoming solid like those situated outside of the asteroid belts. 12. Distance influences planetary makeup. The gaseous planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, and the disputed Pluto, do not have a constant and equal distance between them, as do these solid planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. As the solid planets orbit around the Sun, the point at which each comes closest to the Sun is separated by equal distances of about 30 million miles. Mercury is about 30 million miles from the Sun. Venus is about 60 million. Earth about 90 million. And Mars about 120 million miles from the Sun. On the other hand, the gaseous planets vary widely in their distance when they come closest to the Sun during their orbital journey. Jupiter, about 460 million miles. Saturn, about 840 million. Uranus, about 1,700 million. Neptune, about 2,700. And Pluto, about 3,600 million miles. The consistency of equal or unequal distances between each planet affects their energy forces and overall composition, or the way their organized matter reacts, solid or gas. Matter comes in three basic forms that we can observe within the capacity of our human senses. These are gas, liquid, and solid. The only difference between the three is the energy levels that influence the basic structure of the subatomic particles that make up the matter. Using the same advanced technology by which the solar system was created, all of the planets in our solar system will one day be changed so that they can support life. Until this happens, the larger planets will remain gaseous while the smaller ones remain solid in nature. All of this was precisely planned and determined by the advanced human creators who were responsible for creating our solar system and maintaining its order and balance. 13. Advanced humans created Earth. Although science might dispute the new realities presented in this book, its lack of approval will not negate the fact that they are reality. Science cannot explain why our Earth is the lone planet in the solar system that can sustain life, when it has conceded that all the planets came from the same source. What made the Earth what it is today? Why is it a completely different planet from all the rest? The simple answer: advanced human beings knew what they were doing and why they were doing it. 14. The Earth is billions of years old. The solar system was created in a matter of what we would consider as just a few moments. It took only a few moments for the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to be completely changed by the primitive power of limited nuclear technology. Therefore, it shouldn't be difficult for one to imagine an advanced technology creating the solar system in about the same amount of time, or less. However, the Earth as we know it today took billions of years to form. As mentioned previously, with their advanced knowledge and powers, the creators could have formed the Earth and its environs in just a few moments, as they did the solar system. They could have formed it perfectly, without any flaws, by patterning it after the blueprint of the perfect world on which they live. They could have created each planet precisely as needed to house the different wants and desires of happiness of the batch of newly created human beings destined to become the eternal inhabitants of this solar system. They could have, but they didn't. Why? They did not, because they wanted us to find out what would happen if natural law was left to itself without human involvement. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, and all other natural disasters are not part of a human-controlled, perfect world. They are the result of the forces of nature left to do what they would do if no outside intervention is used to control them. As we advance in our current world in understanding these natural phenomena, we will begin to learn how to predict them. However, without the superior knowledge and technology of advanced humans, who have been around a lot longer than we have, the forces of nature will continue to create disasters beyond our control. On the other hand, in a perfect, advanced world, all aspects of nature are precisely controlled to fully benefit the human race. 15. We needed to see the earth develop imperfectly. As we were being foundationalized in a perfect world, we were guaranteed the right to exercise our own free will. One of the biggest dilemmas we were faced with at this time was the fact that we were still restricted in the use of our individual free will according to the boundaries set by the laws and order of the universe, which have always existed. We came to understand that we were not completely free to do whatever, whenever we wanted. There needed to be some controls and rules that would ensure that the order of the universe would never be disrupted or changed. Still, for free-willed human beings who have the power to act as they wish for the sole benefit of themselves, this was a lesson that needed to be learned with patience. No one likes to be told what they can and cannot do. It was necessary for us to experience a world and observe how its life forms, including us as human beings, develop imperfectly. This helps us to understand the importance of advanced and perfect government control, as explained in Chapter 8. Our experience in witnessing and participating in an imperfect environment would ensure our acceptance of this control and intervention in our lives, realizing it is the proper government to which we should subject our free will. We needed to be guaranteed the purpose for which we were created, happiness. We needed to experience for ourselves that those restrictions on our free agency are necessary and that they will only lead to our individual happiness. 16. An imperfect world provides vital experience. An imperfect world is one that provides the exact opposite of what a perfect world provides. Instead of absolute equality in all things, there must be inequality. Instead of a timeless existence without quantitative measures and values, there must be death and values and measures placed on all things. Rather than complete control of all aspects of our environment, nature must be initiated and then left to itself to act on its own. In other words, we needed to experience a world that would affect our happiness and expose us to heartache, pain, misery, depression, fear, stress, death, and everything else that contradicts the perfect human reality. We needed to experience an opposition in all things. 17. Bacteria and viruses aid an imperfect environment. One of the vehicles by which advanced creators control the environment of an imperfect world is through the unseen world of bacteria and viruses. Bacteria and viruses are programmed life forms that keep an imperfect world, quote unquote our world, imperfect. The atmosphere and environment of our world were created so that bacteria and viruses could live and thrive. Once they were placed upon our world, plants were then introduced that created an environment favorable to higher life forms, i.e., animals. All plants are patterned after similar plants found in perfect human worlds. No life form can exist without first being created and introduced into its environment by the highest life form that exists in the universe, advanced human beings. Because advanced human creators were setting up our world to be imperfect, they created all types of imperfect plants from the environment created by bacteria so that the plants could provide life for imperfect animals. The imperfect animals would then distinguish themselves unequally as the strongest to the weakest, thus establishing the hierarchy of a quote unquote food chain that would add to the imperfection of our world. 18. Nothing exists without intervention. Nothing can exist without the will of a human being. Absolutely nothing. It takes energy to produce the bonds that create any and all matter. These bonds have always been and will always be produced by the energy of a human being taking some sort of action. These actions establish energy bonds that start a perpetual event, which creates matter and then allows it to fulfill the purpose for its creation. The purpose of this creation has been and always will be determined by human beings, the greatest and most significant form of life in the universe. Again, to reiterate, the necessary energy for matter to exist ultimately comes from the actions of advanced humans who are responsible for the creation, perpetuation, and final end, happiness, of the human race. Therefore, although we needed to experience an imperfect world without the intervention and control of advanced humans, our world still needed to be created as an imperfect one by them. 19. Natural imperfections are not our fault. Social ones are. Our creators are responsible for all the quote-unquote opposition to happiness that we find in our world, but only the opposition, wrong, found in the natural environment. We alone are responsible for everything else that is wrong in our human world. We cannot be blamed for the hunger of a stronger predator wanting to kill us for food. Nonetheless, we are responsible for killing each other for no reason other than to protect and perpetuate our own inequality. Our imperfect natural world can be blamed on our creators, but our individual problems can only be blamed on ourselves. However, it was always our Creator's intention to have us live in an imperfect world. In an imperfect world, we would be compelled to act imperfectly in order to recognize and appreciate the difference in how we feel when we act properly compared to when we act improperly. In essence, pun intended, our creators are partly to blame for our imperfections. Without taking away our free will, they gave us no real choice but to partake of life in an imperfect world, so that we would know that everything has its opposite. Knowing that our creators are directly responsible for setting us up to fail in our world makes failure in this imperfect world seem much less difficult to accept. Failure in an imperfect world is success for us as perfect human beings who will one day learn to appreciate who we are and why we exist because of our failure as imperfect humans. The imperfect world that our creators created for us is a perfect world for the purposes of our second stage of human development. 20. The Earth's land masses were once joined. Simply put, our creators formed the plants on our world to support the environment so that the animals could live. This, in turn, helped the plants to propagate without overrunning the earth. To facilitate these events, in the beginning, the land of the earth was created in one great mass to aid in the propagation of all forms of life. It would be very hard for a flower to be wind pollinated across huge distances of vast open ocean water. Likewise, the animals created to help the plants could not swim across the ocean. Many of these insects, animals, are still alive today, and it is quite obvious that no species of insect can, on its own, traverse these great bodies of water. 21. Our world does not support individuality. Each plant is specifically designed to do something to keep perfect balance upon this earth without the intervention of continual human monitoring. The plants take the energy of the sun and replenish the atmosphere of this world, and also provide sustenance for the animals, which depend on the plants for survival. The imperfect natural world does not allow an individual species of any kind to survive perpetually on its own for its own sake. Everything exists because or for the sake of something else. This interdependence creates a perfectly balanced symbiotic relationship that works for the benefit of all species as one. The only thing that has ever disrupted this natural balance is the free will of the human species and its desire for individuality. The imperfect natural world does not provide an environment for the establishment of individual desires and experiences that serve just one being. That's what a perfect world is for. In an imperfect world, everything is dependent on everything else. Take away one thing, and it will cause a ripple effect that will tip the natural balance that keeps things working in their proper order. In an imperfect world, there is no respect for individuality, not in plants or in animals. One will eat the other to survive. Therefore, it can be stated that the imperfect world is all about natural selection and the concept of survival of the fittest. The problem, however, lies in the inability of plants and animals to thrive in their natural state when they are confronted with higher forms of life that are aware of their individual existence and will do anything to protect that individual existence. Animals do not ponder or concern themselves about survival or individuality. They simply do what they do, eat or be eaten. As one of the species placed upon this earth, we humans are forced to work, contrary to the nature of our free will, in order to provide the things that we need to survive. Because of our intrinsic need to protect our individuality, we subdue all other forms of nature to fulfill our needs. This is how we, quote unquote, work. We sense the need for individual protectionism and realize that our world's natural resources are limited. Therefore, we work harder than any other species and are constantly competing with them for what we need to survive, not only physically, but also emotionally, as individuals apart from the whole of nature. In contrast, a perfect world allows and supports human individuality and provides all things necessary for our existence without the need to work for them. There are unlimited resources on the perfect world, thus eliminating any form of competition to get the things that are necessary for our physical and emotional survival. 22. Our natural world does not make sense. Creating something that will ultimately end up being destroyed doesn't make much sense. Watching a gentle and innocent baby antelope being devoured by a hungry pride of lions doesn't make much sense to human reason. Witnessing the devastation of a beautiful tree by the strong trunk of an elephant doesn't make much sense. Knowing that some insects have a short lifespan of a few days or even hours, and that some are even eaten the moment they're born, doesn't make much sense. The imperfect world doesn't make much sense. Animals and plants, however, don't have quote unquote sense. Therefore, they don't care. We do. We have a sense of compassion that compels us to protect plants and animals and allow them to grow and prosper in their own individual environments. Yet, some humans have been eaten by the very animals they were trying to protect. This compassion comes from our human essence and the humanity that was foundationalized in us in our primordial perfect world. No matter how much we try to use our quote unquote sense to understand the natural world, we will not make sense of it. And if we try to make our imperfect world a perfect one by allowing imperfect creations of both plants and animals to exist, we will fail miserably. This would be like a compassionate paleontologist bringing back the meat-eating dinosaurs who would not quote unquote sense that their creators were compassionate, but would instead sense that they were lunch. Or in the same token, it would be like a compassionate botanist wanting to protect noxious weeds. The creation of this world has only one purpose that makes sense. It was created to help us appreciate the perfect world and the perfect plants and animals that exist there, which do not eat us or irritate us in any way, but rather bring us joy. 23. Imperfect humans create more imperfection. If our current program of science does not accept that the purpose of this earth is to allow us to experience imperfection, which it does not, then it will continually strive to learn how nature works, how organisms function, and how it is all intertwined with human beings. In fact, with its learning and progression, science will always only produce more imperfections. Take, for example, genetically manipulated plants and animals, which science believes benefit humankind. No genetically manipulated apple can match the taste of one grown according to the established natural laws of the earth. In fact, everything that imperfect humans create will always lead to some other type of imperfection, which will ultimately cause us more misery instead of more happiness. This is not to say that we should not try. The purpose of this life is to experience the effects of the uncontrolled exercising of our free will. Go ahead, science. Create a Tyrannosaurus Rex and see what happens next. Not only will this gigantic meat eater disrupt the already confused natural balance of our current world, but there will also be those compassionate humans who will exercise their free will and attempt to protect the Tyrannosaurus, a respected form of life, and provide an environment in which it can exist with humans in a symbiotic relationship. And if these compassionate ones are not eaten by the very animal they are trying to protect, they will soon learn that there is not enough room on this planet for any life form that does not serve the purposes of happiness expected by a human being. Moreover, feeding an innocent cow to a T-Rex is certainly not an element of perfect humanity. However, neither is killing a perfectly serene cow that keeps the wheatgrass mowed in a field a show of our true humanity. We kill it and put its seared flesh between two pieces of the naturally matured and processed wheatgrass that the cow was keeping in check, manipulated by imperfect humans into bread, and call it a hamburger. We would be much better off and much more humane eating wheatgrass like the cow. 24. Perfect plants and animals exist for humans. The perfect lion does not have fangs and claws to kill, rip apart, and devour another animal. Lions exist in a perfect world, but they have perfected bodies that allow them only to do what they were created to do: serve the needs of human beings. Perfect lions are like gigantic pets with big eyes and soft, strong backs upon which some people like to ride or snuggle up against. These lions have no need to eat because they are created with a lion's essence, which is a perpetual energy factory that provides the energy a lion needs to fulfill the purpose for its creation. Thus, also are all perfect animals. Perfect plants are the same. They exist only to serve the needs of human beings. They produce the perfect foods that advanced humans and newly created humans eat. However, only advanced humans appreciate the perfection of their taste and texture. Why? Because newly created humans have never tasted imperfection. Thus, they cannot distinguish the difference. But they are given the opportunity in an imperfect world to make a comparison. 25. Nature provides checks and balances to promote balance. During the early developing stages of the earth, plant-eating animals were created to keep the plants in check, or plants would have overgrown the earth. Flesh-eating animals were created to keep the plant-eaters and other flesh-eaters in check. And bacteria and viruses were created to keep them both in check. The very first plants placed upon this earth created the atmosphere that supports all other forms of life. These quote-unquote plants were the algae and other less advanced plants that did not need a quote-unquote atmosphere to exist. All they needed was the energy of the sun. The byproduct of their use of energy was the composition of our current atmosphere. Science knows very little of these primordial plant species. This is because once they fulfilled the purpose of their creation, they became extinct. Once the atmosphere was in place, there was then a need for a large number of plants to get things going. Then enormous plant-eating dinosaurs were created that could consume large amounts of plants. Then, to eat the enormous plant eaters, enormous flesh-eating dinosaurs were created. The end of the plant-eating dinosaurs came when the flesh-eaters ate them all. 26. The dinosaurs died of natural causes. The end of the flesh-eating dinosaurs came when they couldn't catch the smaller and faster prey, such as crocodiles and alligators. So they ate each other, or eventually died off from starvation. The idea that the dinosaur species magically disappeared or were instantly destroyed by some cataclysmic event thwarts the intelligence of beings with a quote-unquote sense that these theories leave too many unanswered questions to be considered true reality. Science is said to be the study of the physical and natural world and phenomena, especially by using systematic observation and experimentation. If this is the case, then let's become quote-unquote sensible scientists and observe what happens in our present time when a particular species of animal becomes extinct. Do they simply disappear? Are they instantly destroyed by a meteorite? Is this what we have quote-unquote systematically observed taking place? No, it is not. Extinction occurs from the destruction of natural habitat or by being eaten, such as by another species higher up the food chain, because a particular species does not have the ability to protect itself or its offspring. Extinction can also be caused by a bacterial or viral infection to the natural state of the species. So, being the simple scientists that we are, and using systematic observation, we can conclude with great accuracy, as we have above, that the same thing happened to the dinosaurs. 27. The theory of evolution is misunderstood. The second characteristic of science is experimentation, yet it is through the experiments of modern bioengineers and hybrid breeders that we can debunk one of the greatest scientific errors of our time, the theory of evolution. This theory generally proposes the following explanation of how all things upon this earth evolved to be what they are. In biology, evolution is the changes in the inherited traits of a population of organisms from one generation to the next. These changes are caused by a combination of three main processes: variation, reproduction, and selection. Genes that are passed on to an organism's offspring produce the inherited traits that are the basis of evolution. These traits vary within populations, with organisms showing heritable differences in their traits. When organisms reproduce, their offspring may have new or altered traits. These new traits arise in two main ways, either from mutations in genes or from the transfer of genes between populations and between species. In species that reproduce sexually, new combinations of genes are also produced by genetic recombination, which can increase variation between organisms. Evolution occurs when these heritable differences become more common or rare in a population. From Wikipedia. This is obviously not a scientific fact that was established by quote-unquote systematic observation, because no one has been around long enough to actually observe these things taking place. Some scientists might argue that science has indeed observed certain gene mutations and other elements of quote-unquote evolution of certain traits in species that have a short lifespan. What they do not realize, however, is that there are much more advanced scientists than they who are monitoring what these less advanced scientists are doing. Just as current scientists can modify the environment of the organisms or the organism itself used in their experiments, advanced scientists can modify anything they want to at any time they want. Nevertheless, through our limited perception of systematic observation, science, we cannot conclusively verify that evolution actually took place because it happened over the course of millions of years. However, we can, quote-unquote, systematically observe what scientists are doing today, unfortunately for the proponents of the theory of evolution. Because their theory is currently being disproven by their own science, we regularly observe the experimentation of their theory by other scientists who are continually creating new species of plants and animals, and it is taking them a few hours instead of millions of years. We can, quote-unquote, systematically observe scientists changing the inherited traits of a population of organisms from one generation to the next. These changes are caused by the current technological advancements in bioengineering and hybrid breeding. We have observed how certain genes are isolated, manipulated, and passed on to an organism's offspring in order to produce the inherited traits, which are the basis of the error of evolution. We observe that these traits vary within populations with organisms showing heritable difference in their traits. When bio and genetic engineering take place, organisms reproduce and their offspring may have new or altered traits. These new traits arise because of the ability of scientists to use current technology to transfer genes between populations and between species. In species that reproduce sexually, These technologies allow new combinations of genes that are also produced by genetic recombination, which can increase variation between organisms. Scientists and their technology can control when these heritable differences occur, so as to become more common or rare in a population, depending on the desire of the scientist. 28. Advanced humans control the balance of imperfect worlds. Therefore, if current primitive scientists can use current technologies to create new species of flora and fauna virtually overnight, wouldn't it make quote unquote sense that advanced human beings, thousands of years in the future, have the technology and ability to create new plant and animal species in an instant? This is exactly what takes place as those who monitor this imperfect world ensure that it remains imperfect for as long as is needed in order for us to gain what is necessary from the experience. We will continually discover new species of flora and fauna as the advanced humans who are responsible for our world continue to create them as needed. As explained previously, they monitor our world and the energy frequencies of every single life form and every single piece of matter. They have the ability, when needed, to introduce new species of plants or animals to serve the purpose of maintaining a perfect balance for an imperfect world. We have discussed how they could have stopped the ancient scientist Democritus, for example, from understanding the basics of electricity in order to keep him from discovering something that could destroy the world before the purpose for its creation was complete. In the same way, advanced human monitors of our planet also add bacteria, viruses, new insects, fish, plankton, or whatever else is necessary to keep the world in its imperfect state. Everything for our own good. It is important to understand that they will never do anything to really harm us. The cause of most things that affect our happiness, disease, illness, etc., is the exercising of our own free will. However, the bacteria and viruses, for example, which they have created and pre-programmed for our imperfect world, have the ability to mutate on their own and adjust to our ever-increasing need to invent antibiotics and antiviral medications to fight them. If we were allowed to create the perfect medication for all of our ills, then the purpose for our imperfect world would be negated. Summary. The principal guideline by which those who oversee our world follow is the principle that they do not intervene into our lives upon the planet we call Earth, except to ensure that the purpose for our existence is fulfilled. The purpose of a perfect world is perpetual life and happiness for individual beings who are aware of themselves and their surroundings and use their environment to enjoy their individuality. In contrast, the purpose of an imperfect world is to allow death and the destruction of one individual entity so that another can continue to live and prosper. Perfection leads to happiness. Imperfection leads to misery. And the greatest situation ever implemented to help us learn the difference between the two was the creation of our imperfect world placed in our own solar system.